Who here likes DC or anime? And that's right, I know, all of you do. Today we're going to talk about a couple of smart boys and see what makes them the world's greatest detective. First thing we gotta ask ourselves, what makes these characters so much better at their jobs than everybody else? And I'm sure a lot of you answered, well, they're a genius, or they have super cool gadgets like a grappling hook, or they're billionaires, right? But what if I told you that you were
incorrect?
You're not technically wrong, but these things do definitely play into it. But my argument is a little bit different. See, I think that the villains they interact with, namely the Joker and Kira, arch nemesis, push them into becoming the world's greatest detective. What's key here is the relationship between each hero and villain and how both duos have thematic similarities throughout their respective series. In order to adequately analyze these characters, I think we gotta take a look at their persuasions and morality. So first we're gonna start off with a couple of bad boys. God. Okay. The morality of the main antagonist often makes or breaks a series as a whole. If the villain lacks proper motivations or doesn't have a convincing and somewhat relatable mindset, the audience can't really take them seriously. Yeah. So what makes both Joker and Light such fantastic and downright creepy ass villains is their relatability. You can see the logic, however skewed, in their worldview. I think the easiest one to start with here is the Joker, and if you haven't heard of him as a character, well, you're missing out, and you've been living under a rock for a while, considering he came out in the 40s. But for those of you who just don't know too much about the character, I'll give you a little bit of background on what he's like and what his morality is. And I think I could sum it up in one clip from The Killing Joke.
All it takes is one bad day. That's how far the world is from where I am.
I'm sure a lot of you have heard the phrase beauty and simplicity, and I don't think this could be any truer for the Joker. I could honestly stop at the fact that the Joker's a nihilist, and that's really all you need to know. But there's a little bit more to it than that. See, he's obsessed with the fact that anyone can kill. Anyone can become what he has. As you saw in the clip, according to him, all it takes is one bad day. And he wants to prove this to Batman in any way possible, and he's gotten close on several occasions. On the completely other side of the spectrum, there's Kira. If you haven't seen Death Note before, Light and Kira are the same character, and I could give you a really lengthy backstory on Light, but I think these clips should cover it.
The human whose name is written in this notebook shall die. At first, I wrote the names of the worst criminals I could think of, like I was cleaning up the world one name at a time. It'll be a new world, free of injustice and populated by people who I've judged to be honest, kind, and hardworking. I will become the god of this new world!
Yeah, that boy crazy! Now, I'm not trying to make light of Death Note. See what I did there? As it's one of the best shows I've seen, animated or not, but what I'm trying to say is that Light's character is filled with nuance. At first glance, his intentions seem positive, although slightly misguided, and part of you roots for him. Throughout the whole show, you want him to win, and you want him to fulfill his dream of getting rid of criminals. But then you see how twisted and evil he becomes by the end. He loses sight of his initial goal of making the world a better place, and then only focuses on becoming the god of the new world. Light's character is a deconstruction, and a brilliant one at that. As he sinks further into the darkness, his flaws and twisted nature become more and more apparent. Eventually, the good intentions he started with become only a source of justification for what he's doing. So really, that was a lot at once, but all you need to take away from this is big brain boy like kill people because make him feel good and powerful. Ooh-wee. Now it's time to talk about the heroes. Jokes aside, Batman and Elle are a lot more similar than you would think. They both view themselves as the embodiment of justice, the absolute good in their universe. Their decisions are always well-researched, informed, and logical. What I think is most important about both Elle and Batman, though, is their undying, or sometimes dying, drive to complete the mission regardless of sacrifice. Although this is stated verbally in both series, I think what the respective writers do very well is show this instead of tell it. And they use the antagonists to fully explore and realize these traits in the heroes. And not only do they do this through specific character interactions, but they also do this through verbally and, more importantly, visually foiling the characters. That being said, there are two specific scenes, one per universe, that do this extremely well, and I would like to break both of those down. The first scene is from The Dark Knight, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with this movie, and for most of you this might be your only impression of the Joker, which is fortunate considering how good of a job Heath Ledger did portraying him. Before I say anything else, you have to understand the essence of every good Batman story is a moral dilemma and how Batman confronts it. And no other villain can really force Batman into positions that the Joker does. Now, the scene I'm talking about in particular is the conversation Joker and Batman have on the rooftop after their fistfight. And I said conversation very intentionally. See, even though Joker lost the fight, it doesn't feel like he's actually the loser, and this is accomplished through a lot of subtlety, especially in the camera angles. The scene starts with Joker hanging upside down, falling off of the building. But immediately as he starts talking, the camera pans to show his face right side up. I definitely didn't notice this the first time I watched the movie, but the effect was definitely still present. The clever use of cinematography forces you to listen to what Joker's actually saying. The dialogue here also sets up the dichotomy between the two characters. Chaos versus order, nihilism versus absolutism, insanity versus, well, I guess insanity. But it also puts the viewer in Batman's position. And when the Joker says,
"I think you and I are destined to do this forever,"
you can't help but think, wouldn't it be easier if he was just dead, if Batman just killed him? But that's the brilliance. Batman does not kill, no matter how much the Joker wants him to. No matter how many horrible things the Joker does, Batman will never give in. And that is the essence of his character. So I know that was kind of short, but I don't think there's much more to be said about Batman. Beauty in simplicity, right? Moving on to Death Note. So the first problem I encountered with this was the fact that there are lots of scenes in Death Note that are outstanding, and it was really hard for me to decide which one to choose, but in the end I decided to go with the legendary tennis match. Now, if you've seen Death Note before, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about, but if you haven't, here's a little sample.
Because I wanted to play tennis with you, you'll assume that I'm preparing to take a step closer. And then you're going to try and trap me by getting me to say something that only Kira would know.
The most impressive part of this scene is the metaphor that it provides for the series as a whole. The tennis match reflects the spirit of the show. In essence, it's a game. Each player thrives on the other's mistakes, and while the ball is in their court, they have the advantage. L chooses a more defensive style of play, waiting on Kira to make an obvious mistake in order for him to gain another clue, or perhaps even corner Kira. On the other hand, Light is extremely aggressive in the way he plays the game. He sees the obvious need for him to win in order to, first of all, protect his identity and find out who L really is in order to kill him. Also, it goes without saying that Light always has the advantage as Kira. He has supernatural help and a superpower, essentially. This match is also filled with an enormous amount of foreshadowing. First of all, it's pretty obvious that L knows Light is Kira, even from the start of this match. He doesn't outright admit it, but you can see that he suspects Light above anyone else. The match is only him testing his theory. Obviously, this isn't enough to provide hard evidence that Light is Kira, but it does kick everything off in the sense that after this match, L doubles down on his efforts in pursuing Light exclusively. The end of the match also foreshadows the end of the first part of the series. But how does any of this prove that L is the greatest detective in this respective universe? And how does the Light's character push L into becoming an even greater detective? I think the answer can be found in this one line of dialogue at the end of the match. Whenever Kira attacks, L only learns more about Kira's identity, tactics, and personality. At this point in the series, L has very little hard information and evidence to determine anything about Kira. Even so, he knows that Kira is located in Japan, he needs a name and a face to kill, and that he hates losing. He also understands that he has the disadvantage while facing Kira. Yet through intuition and some basic observation alone, he's able to profile Kira accurately. And he realizes the only way he can win is by putting himself on the front lines, going on the attack, and getting close to the person he suspects to be Kira. The only real reason Light wins in the end is because he had supernatural help. Every time Light thought he won an interaction, it turns out L was actually the one on top. So, in conclusion, if you weren't already convinced about how epic both L and Batman were, well, I sure hope you are now. Also, considering you stuck around this long, I mean, I'm pretty surprised at least. Go ahead and smash that like button, and I will see you next time with a brand new video.